everyone, and welcome to our General Admin webinar. My name is Frank Ziemba. I'm a senior consultant and trainer at Spider Strategies. Here's a picture of me along with my email address. Also shown is our education email, which is learn@spiderstrategies.com. Feel free to reach out to us if you need some additional info or help. Quickly, just a couple of webinar logistics. First, this webinar is being recorded and will eventually be posted on our Spider Strategies Learn page. All attendees are currently muted and will remain so throughout the entire session. Now, with that said, if you have any questions during the session, you can post them here. We'll either respond if we can during the session. If not, we'll respond after it is over. Next, I'd like to quickly cover our agenda. We'll be reviewing users and groups, calendars, notifications and alerts, and then our most frequently used general admin settings, or at least those that I think are most frequently used. And with that, let's jump right into QuickScore. With my apologies to our Scoreboard customers. Please note that the displays will look a little different from what you're used to, but most of the functionality is going to be exactly the same. Okay, so here's QuickScore. I'm going to start with the discussion on users and groups. Now, I've already logged in as a power user. And with that being done, I can now select settings down in the bottom left. And then within this panel here, I'm going to start by selecting users under a section called users and groups. From here, I can see all the users that have been added to my environment. There's Frank, there's Joe, and there's Tom. Now, if I click on each of them, and I'll just start by clicking on Joe here, I can see which groups they've been assigned to. In Joe's case, he's been assigned to the viewers group. And I can also see if they are an admin of any group, and I can see that Joe is not an admin of anything. If I click on Tom, you'll see that he is tied to the communication users group. He is also not an admin user. And if I click on myself, you can see this is going to look quite a bit differently here. So you'll see that one, I am a member of this most powerful group that we allow, power users. And then at the bottom, I'm also the admin of all the groups that I just showed you there. Okay, so I got a bunch more power than the other two users in my nice little simple environment here. Now, to start this, what I'm going to do is show you the process of adding a user, and it's really straightforward. All I need to do is click the plus icon up at the top there. That'll get me into an add option. And then I get presented with a bunch of boxes that I need to populate at this point. And keep things simple, I'm just going to call this test as my username here. Obviously, I would give this a real name here. I can then provide a valid email address. And I'm just going to type a bogus one. And then I'll populate the first name. I don't need to put in the middle initial or middle name. I could if I wanted to. I then need to provide a temporary password. Make sure I type that again correctly a second time. If not, I'll get an error message when I try to get through this. But then the next step here is what I'm afforded to do is that first time that a user logs in, you'll see that the default here is to have this box checked, which means that that first time they log in, they'll be required to change their password. So you would need to give them whatever you enter here, be it a temporary, just the word password or whatever you define as your initial starting point. You'd have to relay them their username, that temporary password, and then at that point they would key that in, and then they would need to then provide a new password for themselves. Now going forward, what can happen is those users might forget what they've switched it to, okay? So as a power user, you can always go back out here, find whatever user is having an issue at this point, or at that point in time. You can always go back in and override the password and then retick this box, basically like a starting over, if you will there. Okay, at this point then I can also assign this user test that I'm about to create by just applying whatever group that I want to put them in. Are they a power user? Are they a communication user? And what have you. I'm not going to take the time to worry about that right now. There's certainly not going to be an admin of any group. This is just a little test user here. So at this point, I can either cancel or I can click save. I'll just click save so that you'll see that fourth entry now in my environment. Okay, so this panel here, users, is really simplistic. Just basically getting some basic information for the users, getting some starting point with the password to get that user account going. Now, where things really start to happen as far as our environment here is under the groups section. So right now I'm just gone to the next item down there. I've selected that. And now I can see all the groups that are a part of my environment. And I've already kind of given you a feel for that underneath the user section there. So here are those three groups that I've already discussed. Here's my communication users here. And let me actually just start with power users and then we'll kind of work our way down on the other two. So I'm going to start with our most powerful group. Now, I want to clarify something here. In my environment here, I chose to name these groups exactly the same as the group type, okay? So if I click on power users, you'll see that there's a name called power users. This could have been whatever I wanted it to be. It could have been named admin, it could have been named marketing power users, sales power users. In my simplistic world here, I've just named it to be exactly the same as the group type, okay? So just want to make that point clear. Now, the reason I did that from a training perspective, well, it makes things a lot clearer as far as what I'm working with here. So the next section is an important setting that was applied for this group is that for the group type, not surprisingly, this was set to be power users. Okay, so if I go to that drop down, you'll see here, okay, here are the three different options that I can select each group to be applied to. And I've selected the most powerful one there, power users. Okay, so pretty simple stuff here. Just give it whatever name you want to provide, pick the group type. And now you're going to start getting into the work as you start working your way down this list of items here. Now, that first thing that we're going to get into is the option called advanced. So you'll see a permission section. There's two things that I can get into with this. And I'll start with advanced. And you'll see within here that for power users, there is up to 26 individual permissions that can either be all selected using the select all option up at the top, which now says unselect all because I already have them all selected. So I've got a couple things I can play with here. I can do unselect all or reselect them. Also, what I can do is pick and choose just those items that I deem to be appropriate for this group. All right, so let me just hit cancel, go back to that initial view there. Now, let's talk this through here again. So right now in my environment, I've got myself, Frank. I deem myself to be all powerful in my own environment here. So what would make sense for Frank is to be part of a power users group that has access to everything. All right, so you'll see right now I've decided to do a complete select all of all of my permissions here. Now, what if I was creating a second power users group? All right, so for an admin user, this is great, having everything checked. What if this was that, let's say that sales power user group that we talked about? So people that are not essentially in IT, somebody who's not going to be the super guru for this environment. What would make sense for somebody in sales or marketing? It's going to be a powerful user, but not all powerful in my environment. Well, when we get to that, and I'm just going to talk this through without creating another group, we're just going to play with this one power group that I've got here. Well, if this was the case, what I would start by for sure is probably deselecting the super admin section. Okay, so I can either deselect one item at a time here, or if I go to the top box in that section, that will remove all the permissions in that section. All right, so that's the quickest way to do that. 3 items, not such a big deal, but you'll see that there's some sections like admin where you can get into a lot of entries there that you can quickly deselect with the top box. Now, that's the first thing. That's just the quickest thing that I would probably remove for those, let's say, sales power users. Now, I would think through each one of these individually carefully. For the sake of time, I'm not going to get into each of these things. I just want to draw your attention to things to be aware of. But once I leave that admin all powerful group, I do carefully scrutinize all these things very, very closely as far as what makes the most sense for Bob to do, or Joe to do, or Tom to do in my particular environment here, okay? Now, the only thing I'm gonna pick on from this entire list, and again, I could spend a lot more time on this, but a really important option up here is the option called View All Organizations up at the top left, okay? Now, with this box, you'll see, and again, let me cancel out because I'm gonna wind up leaving this for myself as a user here. I'm going back to where everything's checked. Now, you'll see for myself, as this is essentially an admin power user type group, I've left this box up at the top left checked called View All Organizations. Really important. And what this means is essentially what it says is that if this is checked, Frank, as part of the power users group, you're going to be able to see all organizations, okay? So we'll give you a feel for what that looks like in a second, but before I do that, let me just take you to the next place where this will carry over, okay? So I've got this box checked for this group. Now, the other thing that I drew your attention to earlier was that there are two sections within permissions, and there's an option called organization out there. And if I click on that, you'll notice on the right-hand side, there's a section called selected organizations. And for this power users group, I didn't need to do anything, all right? So you'll see that there's nothing that has been brought over from my entire organization world out here onto the right-hand side. And the reason I didn't need to take the time to deal with this is because that setting was selected in that prior view, which is called advanced here, okay? So as long as this is checked, it'll save me a whole bunch of work that I might need to get into as far as org by org, thinking through what makes sense for this particular user group to be able to see. All right, so admin people, they can see everything. Saves me a lot of work there on organization. Now, what about these other groups? All right, so if I go to, let's go down to the next level of power here, which is communication users. So again here, the big difference is that for this group, the name could have been whatever. I just try to make this as straightforward as possible right now. The group type, big difference here, I've selected communication users, took a second, just making sure I picked the right one. Now with this selected, what you'll notice when I go to advanced, well, my set of permissions that are out there has been greatly diminished. All right, you'll see that we've gone from 26 permissions, if you recall, down to 11. All right, so that's just the nature of what this is going to be just by selecting the different group type out there. Now, with this said, for a communication users, they may have full access to all 11 permissions allotted to that group, or they may not. All right, so again, I need to think this through. As soon as I leave that admin type user, what makes sense for people that are part of this communication group bucket? Do I want them to be able to do their own SQL? Maybe not at all, okay, so that's unchecked. Do I want them to update any measures that they can see out there? Maybe not, maybe that's a little bit too powerful of an option to allow for them, so maybe that's turned off. Now, the one I'm going to focus on again, and I'll keep doing this as we work our way down to viewers, is that View All Organizations box, okay? So as soon as I've left that admin type group of people, typically what I do is I do deselect View All Organizations, okay? Now that might not make sense for your environment. You might say, no, I don't care. Any user in my environment can see whatever org structure that's out there. That's fine, but just to be mindful of what I typically will do for my non-admin groups is I usually will deselect this option up at the top. Now with that said, as soon as this is unchecked, I now have work I need to get into, all right? And what that work is going to be, can be quite considerable. So what I'm gonna click on now is organization. Now, in my simple world out here, I've only got a handful of structures that are out there. You probably are all familiar with our generic company structure of mobile world. Now, what I've defined for this communication user group is say, yeah, I'm fine with you being able to see mobile world. Now, what I actually needed to do was select mobile world and add it. You'll notice that if I go to internal right now, there will be an option called add that hasn't been brought over. But for mobile world, that has already been successfully brought across. Now, there's a couple things I can do with this. I can either bring over just the root level of mobile world, or there might be a whole extensive structure underneath this, and you can see where this time can start getting into this. If I'm okay with this communication user group seeing mobile world and all of its descendants, which happen to be 20, what I want to do here is check the box. Now, if that wasn't the case, you can see where I can start spending a lot of time on this, where I might say, well, gosh, I've got a human resources structure out here. I want this group to see everything but human resources. And what that gets into then is creating bit by bit additions on the right-hand side, which I'm not going to get into right now. I just want to call your attention that that is possible. It's by playing around with the selections on the right-hand side. Okay, so for now, what I'm just going to leave you with is this group has the ability to see mobile world, to see a demo structure, and for whatever reason, I also gave them the rights to see testing. Probably this is something in a real world I would probably exclude from groups outside of admin users. Typically, my admin users do the testing there. Okay, for now, we'll just leave that as is, and we'll click cancel. All right, from here, I can also, again, see who's in the group. Right now, I've got Tom in there, and that's the only user. Let's go to our last option, which is viewers. Okay, so viewers now, again, the only difference here is the group type. Again, that drop down, I just picked the last one for this particular group. This is where I get into the heavy lifting here. I'm going to click on advanced, and we can see now we've gone from 26 down to 11, and now we're all the way down to a maximum of 4 permissions to the viewers group. Okay, so within here, you'll see that we do have some permissions. There's just not that many, okay? And within here, again, that same thought is that although there's a maximum of 4 allotted or potentially allowable to this group of people, I've chosen to deselect 2 of them. All right, so this group of people can only change their personal profile, modify a bookmark, modify personal settings, things like that, but they do not, let's go again, pick on this one again, view all organizations, that is unchecked, okay? Now, because that's unchecked, again, that whole thought process comes into play. What do I need to do at this point? I'm gonna cancel out of here and immediately go to organization and say, okay, what makes sense for my viewers group to be able to see? Now, what you'll notice here is that I've only chosen to allow, for whatever reason, just the mobile world, the demo structure. Okay, so that group, if they were to log in, if I were to log in as Joe Viewer at this point, and I'll just show you where this comes into play, and then we'll close on this topic, is that, let me go to a different tab here, and you'll see that I'm logged in as Frank, and Frank, again, has full access to all these orgs in my environment. Mobile world, the full gambit of stuff under mobile world, demo, internal, webinar, all the substructures and all that. If I were to log in as that Joe Viewer user, who's part of that viewers group, the only thing that would be accessible to him would be mobile world. These items at the bottom would behave as if they weren't even in my environment at all. They would be basically cleared out from view, okay? So definitely some good things to be aware of there. All right, now I'm gonna go back to my other tab here. I'm just gonna close quickly just so that you get a feel for this. If you were to build it from scratch, how do you do that? So simple, just click plus at the top, give it a name here, whatever your name, your sales power users, sales communication users. Go ahead and drop that in, pick your group type. And then what I would do is work my way through these options that we spent a bunch of time on now, advanced in organization. And essentially I would go in and select who are the appropriate people for that group. And it's just a matter of clicking within here and say, oh, for this group, I want to add Frank and I want to add Tom. And then once I'm done with that, I would click save at the bottom there. All right, and for the sake of time, I'm just going to leave it at that for now. Okay, with that, let's switch gears and we're going to move on to the concept of calendars. So I'm still in the realm of settings here. Okay, so down at the bottom left, I've got settings selected here. And now what I'm going to work my way to is the middle section of this panel. And you'll see underneath configuration is an option called calendars. Now from here, I can see all the calendars that have been added to my environment. The top 4, at least the way that I've got these things ordered, they are editable and movable within this list, but at the top 4 here, I've got what we call our standard calendars: monthly, quarterly, yearly, and weekly. Down at the bottom are 3 custom calendars that I handcrafted into my environment that I thought would be useful for either testing or maybe real world scenarios that I wanted to see work through from maybe a fiscal perspective as opposed to the traditional calendar year. Now, an important thing to note is that calendars don't automatically extend to the end of time. And to illustrate what I mean by that, I'm going to select my yearly calendar here. And you'll notice that the last period of this calendar, right now I've got 7 calendars that are part of my system here. The last one of this list, purposely at this point, is 2020, okay? And right now we're about a third of the way through our year of 2020. So this might be something that as an admin person, that I need to start to be concerned about, okay? So people might start to wanting to load goals, things of that nature for 2021. Whenever those numbers are ready, maybe that's in a couple months time, maybe that's August, whenever that is. At some point in time, people are gonna say, hey, I'm ready to start loading my 2021 goals out here, and I'm not being allowed to do that. And that's gonna be your clue that, oh, something's going on with my calendars, okay? So visually here, what I've got here, I've got this purposely stopping at 2020. And we might say, all right, April 16th, whatever we're on right now, this might be a good idea to leverage what Frank had shown us by with something called extend calendar. All right, and actually before I do this, let me just take this through one step further here. So I'm gonna go to my other tab here. I'm going to go to my webinar org and pick on product revenue. Okay, so within here now, what you're gonna see is that I've already got this yearly calendar selected, which is great because I wanna show a problem with the yearly calendar. So by the way, back here, there's the ability to pick and choose which periodicity you want. I already had this preloaded to select yearly and the last year in that list here. Now, you'll notice that if I try hitting forward at this point, I am stuck. So I am permanently blocked as I don't care what type of user you are right now, a viewer, communication user, power user. Again, I'm logged in as Frank, Mr. Power User. Everything's checked in under groups as we've talked about. So I've got all the privileges and credentials that I need to be able to do what I need to do at this point. Now, you'll notice that I'm getting stopped. I mean, I can go back to 2019, 2018. If you recall, I've got stuff going back to 2014 in that calendar. All right, so I do have the ability to go all the way back there. But the problem is right now, hey, I'm ready to start loading stuff into 2021 and I'm stuck. All right, so good news is I know how to fix it. So as an admin user, I've got those privileges. I'm going to go back to the other tab. And again, I've got yearly selected. The only thing I need to do here now is understand that, well, there's something called extend calendar that sits out there. And I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And not too tricky, but just a couple manipulations I need to do here as well. I do need to think through what period of time do I want to extend this to? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it to December 31st of the following year. Okay, and this could have been whatever you want. If you want to extend this out to 2025, so you don't have to keep doing this every year, that is certainly your call. Some customers say, nope, I want to kind of lock you down so that you're not making entries out in our system that aren't appropriate. All right, so why should I give you ability to load in stuff to 2025 when it's probably going to be done in error anyway? Okay, so that's why this whole point of stopping people at a certain point exists to begin with. So right now I'm just going to change those values here, December 31, 2021, click extend, and I am done. All right, so with that said, now I've got a 8th period that is now part of my yearly calendar, goes through the next year, which is great. Now, if I go to that tab that I was before, notice that I'm still getting kind of locked here. If you do make a change within tabs, if you don't log out and come back in, you don't have to do that. Main thing to be aware of is that there is the ability to reload the page by clicking the 3rd icon up in the top left there. I'm just going to go ahead and click that, click refresh or reload, whatever you want to call it. Notice that the forward arrow is no longer blocked. Good news. If I click that, I now have the ability to potentially load in information to 2021. What do I mean by loading in information? There is the ability to click update. You'll notice now for 2021, I have the ability to put in numbers. Actual wouldn't make any sense, but certainly the thresholds might be a good thing for me to allow users to populate at this point. Okay, so I can go in now as a user and make those manipulations. Now, a couple things to note, when I did select December 31st, I could have stopped that at June, right? So if I had selected June 30th, 2021, what would have been available in this list would have stopped at June. Okay, so you got to be very careful with what you're selecting. What you select is going to mean something in certain places here. So if I look at this again, if I go up to the top right, I should not be able to go beyond that, and I am getting blocked out of there. So that's a good thing. Okay, so that's a very important topic as far as extending calendars and understanding how that works. Now, I'm not going to get into it with everything else out here, but if I were to go to quarterly, you'll notice that in this particular calendar, I had chose to start it on 2017 as opposed to the 2014 that we saw with the yearly. That was my call. I could have cleaned up this by deleting periods and things of that nature. There is the ability to click on a period and delete it. All right, I'm not going to do that right now because I don't want to trash periods in my environment. But within here, there is the ability, if 2014 is never applicable and there's not data tied to it at all, I could go ahead and click on 2014 and wipe it away from my environment just by selecting the trash can there. Now, the point I want to make here is that the other standard calendars that we have, monthly, quarterly, weekly, the same exact concept comes into play. All right, so I need to be mindful of the fact that quarterly might be stopping at a certain point in time. Now for this one, for whatever reason, I had chosen to extend the quarterly calendar out to 2022. All right, so for this one, I don't need to worry about it for a couple of years out here. But if I ever needed to, I would need to click on this particular calendar, click extend, and walk my way through exactly what I just showed you as far as making that happen. And this is going to look a bit differently because quarters are going to have 4 of them as opposed to the yearly calendar, which just had 1 period per year. Okay, so we'll accept that. That works great there. Now, let's go ahead and pick on one of my custom calendars. And I'm going to click on fiscal year here. Okay, so the point with fiscal year is that we certainly have some clients out there that do not operate on a January 1 through December 31st calendar basis. All right, so they track things maybe from July 1 through June 30th. Got government goes from October 1 through September 30th. Okay, so things like that are certainly capable to manage and govern within our product here. Now, the question is, how do you go about dealing with this with the custom calendar? And the reason I'm picking on this one is because the behavior is different with this. You'll notice that here, there's not something called extend calendar. And that's an important distinction. Within the custom calendar, what you'll see, if you ever need to introduce, in this case now, a third fiscal period, what I need to do is click add period, and that will bring up a similar type dialog, but it is different. And what I'm going to do here is provide a period title, and I'm going to be consistent with what I saw already configured. I like being consistent everywhere and try to follow the same scheme as I'm working my way and building things up. All right, so be careful with that. Try to keep everything nice and neat. And then within here now, what I'm going to do is select what is the start date for this particular fiscal year. And thankfully, it's July 1st, 2020. Which is my start date, which is wonderful. I don't even need to do anything there. Now the end date, well, that's not so good. All right, so this one I don't want ending on July 2nd of 2021, but I just need to make a manipulation here. Maybe I need to go back a month and just click on June 30th. That's it. So at this point, I had a nice defaulting starting point. If it wasn't already there, I just need to select the appropriate time, appropriate date. Fix the end date if I need to, and then click add period. And now I'll have a third entry. And again, I like to audit just to make sure things are looking the way they should. Am I going from 2018 to 2019 to 2020 as a starting point? And then am I going from 2019 to 2020 to 2021 as the end point there? And that all looks wonderful. So we'll call that work good there. Now, I just want to give you a feel for, let's just see where this comes into play at this point. And I'll just quickly show you that in my other tab here. So if I go back to my other tab, what do I need to do again? I need to click refresh. So reload, refresh, whatever you want to call that, third icon, top left. And now what I'm going to do is, now be careful to not get confused here. So the yearly is again my standard traditional calendar. Now what I've got out here that I just manipulated was fiscal year. Okay, so within this list now, I had to, as soon as I clicked reload or refresh, I now have that third period accessible to me, and I don't want to do anything with it. I just want it to make sure of the fact that it was existing out there, which it certainly is. All right, let's go back to my other tab here, and I'm sorry to go back and forth with tabs, but I do think it's important to see how things get impacted as you make a change here on the admin view. All right, so this one I think you'll have some fun with here is a calendar that is again a custom calendar, and I've got this called YTD for year to date. Call that whatever you have wanted to. And right now I like the label YTD for year to date. And I just wanted to give you this as an example out here as far as working through this. Now, what I've got out here, and this could have gone back as many periods as you want, but let's say I want to have a dashboard that shows me a trend of 3 years. And let's go back to our traditional calendar where we're going from January 1 through December 31st. So let's get that fiscal discussion that we just had. Let's just throw that out the window here. So we're operating off a traditional calendar. And right now we're in April 16th. And we're saying, okay, well, I want to be able to have a calendar that's showing me year-to-date information through the last completed month. So in this case, our last completed month is the month of March. And what I've got set up for this is 3 years. I've got a period called through March 2018, 2019, and then 2020. And you'll notice that these are very similar, except the values are just a little bit different. We're operating within the year 2018 for this one, and then obviously working our way down to 2020. Now, with this, there is some work here. It's not a lot, but as soon as we get to May, I would need to go in and update this through April and so on for, in this case, 3 periods. The good news is it's relatively painless. I'll just quickly show you this here. I would go to edit, I would clean up the title, change that to April. I would edit the end date, and I would put that through April 30th of 2018, and away I'd go. I can even just type in a number here down at the bottom. And if you're not comfortable playing around with the calendar toggles there, I can just plug in a number. Okay, so with that said, we're just gonna say, well, great, you already did all this work for us. We've got those 3 periods nicely set up through the last completed calendar month. Now, what I'm gonna show you with this is a really nice, powerful tool that you can get into. So hopefully, if you've worked with the tool before, we're treating this as admin. So we're hoping that you've seen dashboards and are aware of the fact that we've got this wonderful section out there that you'll probably spend most of your time in as a power user of the tool, a section called dashboards. So within here, I've clicked on dashboards, and I've got just one dashboard built called, surprisingly enough, year to date, YTD. All right, now within here, what I've got built up is when I showed it before quickly, I had a financial section and I had 4 measures that were built that are part of my revenue that are coming into the company, let's say, in my fictitious mobile world example. I've got one measure called, or KPI, whatever your preference is, product revenue. And what we'll notice is that for the year to date, thankfully, this particular KPI is trending up. All right, and actually it's kind of trending way up, but if we take a look at the scale here, we can see the values. We're operating in millions on this one. So good news is we're trending up. Book revenue, another one of my 4 measures, 4 KPIs out there. Well, that one unfortunately is trending down, okay? So I've got this laid out as such for a reason, but again, look at the scale here. So this one's operating in thousands. So this one's trending down, but we'll see for a second, it's not as bad of a situation as the positive that's happening here. Now, training revenue, the third measure, is perfectly flat. We've got the exact same performance through March of 2018 as we did in 2019 as we do in 2020. All right, so that measure couldn't be any more consistent than what we're seeing there. Now, the main thing that we might be tracking is total revenue. All right, so as a manager of finance, I might come into this dashboard and just be looking over here, total revenue. How are the three measures, summing them up, how are they doing? And if this thing is trending up, I quickly look at it, great, everything's wonderful, I don't need to worry about it. Or, I could look at this a little bit more in detail. Hey, why are you trending up like this when this measure's kind of tanking, right? And that's kind of already been established as far as what I explained before. This is operating in millions. This one's operating in a lower scale of thousands. So the positive of this has overridden the negative effect of that, hence our overall is trending up. All right, so hopefully you like that one. You can, if you haven't thought about doing something like that with calendars, you can start deploying immediately just by creating a couple things there within the calendar section. All right, so we're done with calendars. Hopefully you enjoyed that. We're going to move on to alerts and notifications. And let's go back to my other tab here and click on home. So I'm going to start this discussion of alerts by just saying that we do have 4 different types of alerts available within our system. We've got something called a user subscription alert, a initiative task or milestone editing alert, a broadcast alert, and then we also have what's called a global system-wide alert. And thankfully, I've taken the time to define each of those in order under my alert section here. So that's the good news. I've got them all defined here. Now let's kind of say, well, what's going on with these alerts? When I log into the system, and again, everything is user driven. I've logged in as Frank. Frank's a power user. Frank's got access to different panels. But the home screen that we see here is custom driven to me. All right, so what I mean by that is that Frank, when I log in, might be getting 4 alerts. Somebody else that logs in might be getting 0 alerts, all right? And why is that? Well, I might be tied to finance. I might be the finance manager. That might be one of my critical things that I track. And one of those things that I deem to be the most important thing to track within finance for Frank is the measure called, or KPI, total gross profit, okay? So within here now, maybe I only want to be alerted if something bad is going on with total gross profit. And unfortunately, if we take a look at this, we say, well, yeah, we've got something horrific going on with total gross profit. So if we take a look at this, we see that we now have a normalized score of 0 for our prior month. And we might say, stop the webinar. We've got a crisis that we need to deal with at this point. So I'm going to say, yeah, let's go ahead and deal with it. Let's let everybody watching this recording go ahead and deal with this. So we're going to click on it, and what we'll see is that I get taken down to that measure / KPI directly within the system. All right, and what we can do with this, well, you can see, great, I got alerted to a problem, but now I can start doing analysis on what on earth the problem is, okay? So within here now, I get a nice trend of what's been going on for the past year, which is our default. So all these views, that if you're not familiar with this, nothing I handcrafted. Once you start plugging in numbers, all these wonderful things that you see out here will automatically appear. A section called the chart, which is there. I can now leverage that chart and see everything's going great. Not only does this measure in the month of March throwing an alert, well, if I start doing analysis here, I might be like panicking at this point saying, all right, we were operating all the way up here at 250, and now all of a sudden we're down here. And this kind of makes sense with, if we're dealing with our global crisis right now, this might be a realistic scenario that many companies, unfortunately, out there are dealing with. All right, so this might be a great time for me to have an alert established, tracking something like total gross profit, and saying, all right, not only do I need to be aware of this fact, but I might need to do something with it. All right, so with this said down here, I'm not going to get into a lot of these things in detail right now. I just want to draw your attention that there is the ability to add notes. I'm let's say the owner of this metric, and I've already gone in, I happened to catch this alert already, and I've created a note that says, what on earth happened to our total gross profit in March? If I click on that note, you can see that that was me. I had posted this comment 10 days ago. When I click on it, I can also get, at this point, a chain of responses that have come across since. All right, and we can see out here, oh, Tom, the second user in our system that we looked at earlier under the user section. Well, thankfully, Tom's already chimed in, and he said, yep, this is a big problem, and I'm going to start researching it. So anyway, that gives you a feel for how you can start leveraging this tool and alerts using a measure alert here. Now, I'm going to go back to, when we're done with this, we'll go back to clicking on the home panel up at the top left there. Now, moving down here, what we'll see is the next thing that we'll get into, which is the initiative, task, or milestone alert. And you'll see that I've got an alert that shows me that the total budget for this initiative was changed by somebody, I can't tell who, from 175 to 150. All right, so I get that alert loud and clear. The question is this a problem? And I might say, yeah, that's a big deal. Somebody just chopped 25,000 away from my budget. Who did it? Let me figure out what's happening. And I'll go ahead and click on it. And I can go down here and take a look at a bunch of information. Now, the only thing I'm going to look at for the sake of time is this little triangle. And I can see who made the change. And it was like, oh, Frank, that was you. You made this change. So in honesty, I would never have been concerned about that alert because I was the one who triggered it to begin with. All right, so, and I'll show you how this gets set up in a couple seconds here. But for now, that's where you go to identify that. I'll click home and get back to the rest of our alerts here. Okay, so the third alert is a broadcast alert, and hopefully it contains really important information. Typically, this is something that you're sending out to your entire user base of the system. So you don't want to make jokes type of things. You want to send out some information that is going to be valuable to your entire user base out there. Now, the question is this one valuable? Well, I sent out a global alert. It was me. I can actually see who sent it. So this one I'm not worried about at all as far as needing to troubleshoot it. I sent it. I just alerted the entire system that, hey, we've got a huge problem with total gross profit. Tom, everybody get involved and start troubleshooting what's going on with that performance, and let me know what's going on. All right, so that's what that alert's all about. And that will take us down to this last alert, which is the system-wide alert. In this particular case, what this alert is triggering is going just to me, and I'll show you how this gets configured. But anytime there is a response to a note that I had typed into the system, so I just showed you that with gross profit, and I sent a note that said, hey, what on earth is going on with total gross profit? And Tom had responded. Okay, now there is a configuration that I don't have to just kind of guess, hey, did Tom respond or not? There's a trigger that can be sent where I'll be alerted to that, and I can, not even having to drill on this, I can see Tom's response, which is the same exact comment that we looked at before. Okay, so we'll leave that be. Now, with that said, and we're getting short on time here, I do want to just show you quickly how these get created, and I'm going to kind of fly through this here. Now, let me stay on this panel here. I'll go to Scorecards, I'll go to demo, and let's just say, how did you create that alert that was sitting out there for total gross profit? And I'll just show you a little different thing for this particular KPI measure. If I click on this one, you'll see a little blue symbol up at the top, and I'll show you now how that gets created. If I click on book revenue, you'll notice that for basically every other measure out there, it's going to be sitting in gray up at the top, that alert section. Now, to populate that or to start getting triggered for an alert there, I need to click on it. I need to then select edit alerts. Then I'm going to start moving a little bit quickly here. For time's sake, I'll click on add. I can pick from 3 different options. I'll click on score change in this case, and basically I want to get triggered when I'm in the normalized scoring range of red. So whenever I'm below or equal to a score of 3.34, I want to be alerted to that, in this case for the book revenue KPI. Okay, and it's just that simple. It's clicking on it, going up to alerts up at the top. If this was done in error, maybe I set that to the wrong metric, I can go back to it, click edit alerts, find whatever I had just established, click delete, and click Save to blow that away, and my blue coloring goes away as well. All right, let's move on to the next one. That was part of our example, initiatives. And I'll pick on my Build SEO Capability initiative out here. Now, how do I trigger that alert? And where that is done, and again, I've got to have rights to be able to go into an edit panel with initiatives in this case. Again, I'm a power user, I can do everything in the tool. The only thing that I need to do is trigger some type of a change to my structure of this initiative. In this case, I'm changing the budget from 150 to 100. You'll notice that when that is done, I can now check a box called Notify Assigned Users and Groups of Changes down at the bottom. And what that will do is trigger an alert that we saw before to the list of people that you see here. Okay, so right now, Frank's the only person assigned to this. Would I ever take the time to trigger an alert to myself? No, I would not. Okay, what if there was a whole list of users that were also part of this initiative? Well, then it would make sense. And I would just have to deal with the fact that I'm gonna get an alert in addition to maybe 50 other people, okay? So I would then hit save. For now, I don't wanna bother myself with an alert. I'm just gonna click cancel and be done with that one. All right, how do I trigger the broadcast alert? And I'm gonna toggle quickly again with my other panel here, going to settings. So under our admin panel, we're here for users, groups, and calendars. I'm now going to an option called Send Broadcast Alert. And what I would do within here is I would type a message, and this is where I sent that alert, hey, we've got a crisis going on with total gross profit. I don't have time to type that right now. Type the word test, and I can then pick who do I want this alert to go to? Do I want it to go to everyone? Do I want it to go to just myself so I don't bother anybody else? I certainly can do that. Important options out here is there is an option called Send Notification in a pop-up. All right, so if this was something that was so critical that I wanted everybody who was logged into the tool to be able to see that right this second in a pop-up, as opposed to navigating to home and then saying this number has gone from 2 to 3 or something like that, I would probably want to check this box and then click Send Broadcast Alert. Okay, so for now, I don't want to send that. I don't want to trigger off an additional alert to myself, and we'll leave that be. All right, now the last thing that I want to show you here as far as alerts is concerned is how did that note get triggered here? And I'll just show you that, and then I'm going to come right back to this in a minute as we close with our session here. But there is a section called Application Administration. Under Configuration, this is where we were with calendars before. Now, by default, I believe the option here under the Alerts panel, there's an option called Note Reply To. I believe that's going to be set to No by default. My preference, my recommendation, you don't have to follow it, is to make that a switch to yes, so that anybody who types a note can immediately get alerted when somebody replies to it, like Tom had replied to my comment before, okay? So that needs to be set. You then need to click save, and then whenever somebody replies to a note, everybody in the system will get that alert if somebody replies to them, okay? So that's that. Now, let me go back to home here. And let's go ahead and just quickly review some of the things that we're looking at here under the alert section. And you'll notice that as you start clicking things, some things might be disappearing from view. And one of the things that I just want to show you here is how do you bring something back? All right, so if you had clicked on something, you want to get it back to your environment. Now, maybe it's an alert that you only want to see one time. Once you've seen it, you never want to see it and get bothered with it again. What you can do is you can go to this alerts panel. You can also get to that by clicking Show All Alerts right underneath that section. So two things do exactly the same thing. Now, what you can do here is if it's something that you never want to see again, you can click Delete. I like keeping it around because I like having it for webinars such as these. Okay. So with that said, if I want to bring that alert back and have that back on my home panel, what I would need to do is click the Mark as Unread option. All right, so there's a nice little option. You just check that box. Let me go ahead and click this other one, Broadcast Alert, bring that one back. Now, if I were to go back and click Home at this point, what you'll notice is that, click Welcome underneath the home panel. What you'll see is those alerts will have been cascaded and brought back onto this section here, okay? And that's certainly a good thing to be aware of. And that was a change that came across, if you've been a long time customer, we brought that across around last June when we migrated to version 3.3. So good thing to be aware of there. Okay, with that, we're going to close with some general admin topics. I'm going to go back to our settings panel here. Okay, so under settings, and we've seen this a few times now. I'm going to start by just touching on for a second, under data import and export, there's a section called scheduled exports. All right, so within here now, anything that I've chosen to be scheduled, published monthly, quarterly, what we're looking at here is a monthly staff meeting briefing that was set up by me, being sent to me. And the question is, well, yeah, great job. You set up a scheduled export, but wouldn't it have been nice if you sent this to more people than just yourself? And the question is, how do you fix that? All right, so what I can do with this is that, well, I'll just hover over a few things. If this was done in error, I could delete it at this point. But right now, I'm just going to show you that I could go into an option called Edit. And this is where I can clean up a bunch of different things out here, okay? So if I don't like the fact that this is going out quarterly, hey, maybe we're having this board meeting monthly all of a sudden. Maybe I want to switch this to be published monthly and sent out monthly to who? That is right now just going out to me. I can go in here and say, oh, Tom, you now are going to start getting a push of this monthly briefing every month. Once I would have made that change down here at 12 a.m., okay? And an email would go out with the PDF of the monthly briefing, okay? So good thing to be aware of out here as far as making manipulations to anything that's been pushed across as a scheduled item. Now, right below that is an option called Shared Dashboards and Strategy Maps. We do have the ability to share out just those two things. All right, so if you have a dashboard, you want to make that accessible to the web, you can do that. There's an option to push these things across, and I'm just going to briefly show you where that can be done for now. For the sake of time out here, these things that we're looking at right now is there is the ability to push a dashboard to a shared item. And it's just a matter of clicking this. It creates some text, a snippet that can then be selected. So it creates this long cryptic HTML code that I'm not even going to show you at this point in time, but it would be accessible to me. It's a one-time click from that other panel that I just showed you. If you ever want to see what that code was, you would click this. You'd be able to then maybe push that across to other people. So it creates a link that you can send them, or if you want to embed that in a dashboard, you can copy that HTML snippet right out of this section and embed that into a HTML wireframe or something like that. Okay, if this was done in error, again, I can always delete that. When I delete this, this item is no longer accessible as a shared content item over the web. All right, so good things to be aware of there. Now I'm going to close with the application admin panel. All right, so if we take a look at this, we were here already once before. Now up at the top left, these are where you can trigger different types of alerts within the environment. And I'm just going to redraw your attention to what I just spoke about before. So one thing that I typically will change from our default, as I mentioned, is switching the note replied to be yes. And if you want to trigger alerts for every red measure that turns red, you can see where that can start to be problematic, where people start getting pinged on every single measure that turns red. Maybe they're responsible for thousands of thousands of measures out there. You probably want to be a little bit careful as far as just merely turning that one on. But if you got a small little subset of measures that are out there for a user, this might be something to consider to alert them on when a measure turns red. Okay, under scoring, it's going to draw your attention to a couple things under this, or maybe just one thing here. Now, one thing that I do like switching is that you'll see a section called by default missing values, and you'll see that there's options to either treat them as 0, NA, blank, or make entire equation blank. This right here at the bottom happens to be our default. I did make that switch. I did click save after I made that change. So I want to show you quickly where that comes into play here. and I'll just pick on this, hit new scorecard item. When you're creating a scorecard item, and there is the ability to create a calculated measure, you see right here how this is nicely defaulting for me to treat missing values as blank. That is my preferred behavior as far as bringing that across. Now, alternatively, if you left the default back here, this would have come across, meaning that any missing value makes the entire equation blank. What does that mean? All right, so if I was doing a calculation under set equation and I was summing up 3 measures, all right, product revenue, training revenue, and book, and I had gone in and plugged in 2 of those numbers, so product and training, well, the total would show up as blank until that 3rd component, book revenue, somebody finally dropped in a number, all right? So that might not be the most optimal behavior with that, and I'm just showing you a way to, instead of having to keep switching this to this maybe your preferred behavior, it will default to this always and forever going forward until some admin person went back here and changed it on you from what you had switched. All right, so that's that. Other things to look at here. One thing that I do like setting, if we go to data format section, is the default number precision. I typically like switching this. I believe the default is 1. I like having that as 2. The reason for that is from a normalized scoring perspective. Let me see if I click done here. Perfect. All right, so here, if we take a look at this number here, our default might have been something like 5.3. And if you get very familiar with the scoring, you'll see that numbers like 3.33, 6.67, they mean something. So I like having that second digit coming across, and you'll see that that won't be the case unless somebody who's an admin switches this to 2 digits. All right, so that's just a matter of preference there. Quickly, if I click choose available currencies, a lot of questions that we get on this is where can I add in additional currencies? And you'll see we have some defaults. I'm in the US, so obviously I've got US dollar checked. If you want to add something else, this is where you would click on it and then click update to bring it across. Quickly scrolling up to the top under general settings, I'm just going to pick on really important option up here, default calendar period. You'll see we've got 2 options, most recently completed period or current period. I always leave that as most recently completed period. So right now we're in the middle of April. Typically our data does not get loaded until the end of the month. So I want to, when I log into QuickScore to Scoreboard, I want to see March as my defaulting period. And the reason for that is this setting. If you prefer to always come into the current period, you just need to switch that and click save there. All right, I'm gonna leave all the other ones there. I'm just gonna quickly toggle down to the bottom and just alert you to an authentication settings section. And this is where you can manipulate things like passwords. Should I lock people if they don't know how to type their password in? If they fail once, they're done. They have to send an email trigger to me or to the other admin people in the system to be able to get a new password refreshed and things of that nature. Okay, so there's a section that governs that back out here. All right, that was a lot of speaking. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Let me just pull back my calendar here, just my PowerPoint, just refresh your memory as far as what we've covered. Here's our items that we looked at. I'm gonna bring back this item here just to show you our email address to contact us. Again, hopefully you found that informative. We will have a recording of this session available within a day or so, hopefully at some point later this week. If not, please contact us, shoot us an email, say, hey, we haven't gotten the recording yet. But the last thing I just want to leave you with is that we will be getting back together. Our next session is planned for next Thursday, April 23rd. It will once again be led by me. Hopefully you don't get tired of my voice. And I'll be covering the topic of data automation. So thanks for coming, and I hope to see you all again next week. Take care.